Hello and welcome to another episode of Nutanix Weekly, a podcast all about Nutanix from your friends here at XenTegra. We like to call these content with context because we take the best information we can find on the internet and bring it to you with our context from real world experiences. I'm your host today, Phil Sellers. I'm the practice director here at XenTegra for Modern Data Center. And I'm joined with two of my solutions architects, both of which, interestingly, are former Nutanix employees. Both have spent time working with customers from Nutanix. First up, Mr. Andy Greene. Andy, good morning, and hope you've had a good weekend. Anything special over the 4th of July?
It was a great fourth. Friday was all about family. Saturday had a few chores to get done, and Sunday I was able to head out to Falls Lake and do some paddleboarding. So, really nice extended weekend, and excited to be here.
We had the weather for it. It was beautiful this weekend. Hope that everyone really listening had a great 4th of July. Also joined with Chris Calhoun, the man, the myth, the legend. Chris, how was your 4th of July?
Fantastic. No, it was great. Very much. I enjoyed the long weekend. Weather was great, like you mentioned. Good time with family. So definitely relaxed and refreshed. So that was a well-needed long weekend.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Work-life balance is tough. We all work in technology. It's a pretty demanding job, especially if you're on roll, some sort of an on-call rotation, or if you're not able to maybe share the time with family because you're necessary and can't get away. So appreciate everybody, practitioners and things who maybe didn't get to spend as lovely of a 4th of July with us the way that we did with our families. But yeah, that's the line of duty here in IT. And, 24/7 is the demand sometimes with our companies, with our businesses. And so we understand that it may not be possible. So we really do appreciate all the hard work that you're putting in to make things happen for the business that you work for. Speaking of making things happen, today we want to talk a little bit about migrations. And this is a big topic because of a number of different things. But let's be honest, one of the major things is the shift after Broadcom acquired VMware that has made a lot of mid-market customers where we work most often really look for alternatives. And so as you look for an alternative, migration is an inevitable part of moving your workloads. And so there's a lot of different ways that we could go and approach migration, but easy is the best path, right, guys?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And one of the things that I do love about Nutanix is they've given us a number of ways to make it easy. It would really be difficult, if not impossible, without migration tools. If we had to sit and actually rebuild every VM in an environment from scratch, I mean, that the time and effort required would not be worth migration. Um, you know, Andy, as you kind of work with our customers and advise them, what are you sort of looking at in terms of readiness, or what makes sense in terms of rebuild versus migrate?
Yeah, really good question. I'll preface this by saying when I started at Nutanix back in 2016, AHV was newer technology for them. And what I saw over the next 6.5 years while I was there was that every single year it became more and more mature. We saw more workload support, and it became just a very tightly integrated part of the Nutanix ecosystem. And I was there at that point, that critical point where we started seeing new deployments. Over half of them were on AHV, so it was a really interesting time to be there. With regards to migrations, I think that a lot of the workloads that we see in the data center are just table stakes at this point. Things like Windows VMs, Linux VMs. We can generally just trust that we're not going to have any issues there. Specifically in the migration world, there are a few workloads that we treat as special. Things like domain controllers. They can have some difficulties migrating. So typically, I'll recommend that my clients stand up a new domain controller, sync it with their Active Directory, and then transfer those roles from the old environment to the new. Pretty simple, couple of extra steps that we have to do there, but it's generally in the wheelhouse of these IT teams that we're working with. Databases can be another challenging workload. In a lot of cases, we'll actually recover those. We'll use their third-party backup solution. That can be a really good way to redeploy that database onto a new virtual machine running on Nutanix. But the ones we really have to look out for would be anything that's some type of third-party integration directly with VMware. And we need to understand if there's an option for that software to integrate with AHV. So, I typically ask my clients, did you have any workloads that deployed as an OVA or an OVF inside of your VMware environment? And with those, we're going out to the vendor's website. We're looking to see if there's an AHV package that we can download and deploy. But those are the ones that we really tend to put a lot of focus into. What that is going to look like running on Nutanix's hypervisor.
Chris, I know you just went through this activity, especially looking at those virtual appliances deployed as OVAs for one of our customers. What does it look like these days? I mean, how many were compatible? How many weren't compatible as you've been kind of working with customers?
Yeah, this particular customer had several OVAs that were obviously previously deployed on VMware, and it really made sense to now migrate the customer away from VMware onto AHV. They were looking to take care of some of that goodness. Obviously, the stack and the Nutanix ecosystem is built for AHV going forward, really flexible in extending your use cases. And some of those were legacy in the sense that it was really focused on, hey, yeah, in the past, everything's built exclusively for VMware. Now, a lot of those third-party integrations do have specific notes calling out other hypervisors. And that's, to me, obviously the way the IT community and the world of IT is going is, hey, look, we don't need to put all our eggs in the VMware basket necessarily, in the sense that the flexibility for small to medium businesses to not get locked into a VMware renewal is really key in the sense that they need to have options. And I think that's where, because Nutanix has the forethought to, hey, look, Mr. Customer, we are giving you alternatives. And we were talking about it before we started. Move's a fantastic tool for that. So being able to offset those previously required VMware OVAs to now, hey, we're blessed and certified and highly capable of using AHV moving forward. That's a blessing to a lot of teams as they look to move off of VMware.
Yeah, I agree. And OVA, the format really doesn't make a difference. Nutanix can accept that. It's generally what's inside of that disk that matters. And so we're seeing a lot of very specific releases in the native KVM formats from a lot of vendors too. And so it may be that we can't migrate the OVA, but we can certainly redeploy and then move the data along with the OVA. And so we're taking that approach in some cases. But yeah, to your point, we're seeing a lot more KVM specific. And just as a reminder, AHV from Nutanix is based on open source KVM, which means anything that supports there is supported inside of AHV for the most part. So you see a lot of those notes now, like Chris said. We're kind of going a little out of order, but we've got a blog post here. It's called Migration to AHV Brownfield Considerations. It's written by Brian Sir, a senior technical marketing engineer at Nutanix. So shout out to Brian. Thanks for providing us something to discuss today. You can find this out at nutanix.com/blog. And I'm actually going to take it in a little bit of a reverse order. We talked kind of the reasons why, but Chris, you mentioned move, and I mentioned easy button. Those two things are synonymous to me. So, from a Nutanix move perspective, that's probably the easy button for customers to get migrated, right?
Absolutely. From my time at Nutanix, I was able to help several customers help themselves, actually. We would go through set up move with a customer as a first opportunity for their cluster migration. And in their environment, it just made sense to walk them through it so that then they could continue the process as they continue moving workloads in different phases. The tool's set up perfectly so that you can integrate with your existing VMware solution. Obviously, you provide it credentials to vCenter. It will then go through and inventory all of the VMs that are in your VMware cluster, and then also sync it up with the target AHV cluster. The benefits to the process, I can talk you guys through it. It's being able to take workloads and schedule those. They don't have to immediately migrate. The benefit is, think about those guys that you mentioned at the top of our podcast of, hey, yeah, if you have to work nights and weekends, we understand. But the benefit here is you can schedule these replication jobs for the Nutanix Move tool during the work week, so that as you're working on these VMware VMs, they continue to sync up in the background and create AHV VMs on the back end. Same IP scope. Obviously, the AHV VM is a skeleton and becomes the final solution whenever you do the cutover. But initially, it's a great opportunity to keep those bulk VMs that Andy mentioned, the Linux VMs, the Windows VMs, keep those in sync for a period of time so that you can schedule with the business maybe a downtime window. And in that window, it's a smaller window because you don't have to rebuild, Philip, like you mentioned. So really the key there, and I'll let Andy jump in here, is the flexibility of the tool. Being able to schedule 100 VMs at a time is fantastic. And then cutting those over in stages or phases as you see fit as a business so that you have your applications synced up accordingly. And it just is a fantastic tool with a lot of forethought from Nutanix of, hey, we know migrations are tough. We know that that folks don't want to have to deal with that. It's sometimes easier in their minds to say, well, we'll just pay the higher fees and that type thing to stay on VMware. Well, no, Nutanix has got a solution for you that makes sense. And that's really key to the easy button, as you mentioned, Philip.
Yeah, and one thing I'd add, I think we're talking about VMware right now, but this could also be Hyper-V to Nutanix. Any of the VMware cloud tools like VMC, native AWS workloads, native Azure VMs. So Move is very full featured as far as being able to ingest those workloads into Nutanix and give you that successful migration path. I like to call it an easy button sometimes.
And that's not all. It's also inclusive of files. And so
That's true.
you've got NetApp or you've got Windows file shares. It's a great way to migrate data, unstructured data, into Nutanix Files platform. It is full featured. And I think that's the key. As we're advising customers, there's a lot of fear around the migration services and around how to make that happen. The key here, I think, is that there are great tools available at no cost. They're not good enough. They're great tools and they're full featured. That combined is what really makes it the easy button we keep talking about. That piece of it really helps us to get the job done for customers of all sizes. 100 VMs is a lot in one fell swoop. I mean, you could think of grouping these by applications, how you're going to test it. And so there's a lot of strategy that can go into how you make those migrations happen. And as Andy pointed out earlier, not all VMs necessarily fall into the bucket of move, domain controllers and things that have their own resiliency we may rebuild. OVAs and things may be redeployed. But at the end of the day, this does give us a very robust tool set for most of the virtual machines that exist in the environment. That I think is the key. Chris, you mentioned this. Oftentimes the approach we take with customers is teach a man to fish. What did those services engagements typically look like when we go in with a customer?
To me, I think that really the focus is identify the workloads that are suited and segment off the ones that need special attention, like we've talked about, the domain controllers, the database servers, et cetera. Obviously, there's specialty tools for those. But in this case, to me, it's identifying your workloads with also any dependencies. That's really key so that you can move, we'll say, an application server, a database server, and a web server together. Having those similar to your disaster recovery plans of migrating workloads and powering these up at the same time. Move's got a fantastic feature built in, and it's really a safety net in the sense that part of the final process in the replication of Move is whenever you're ready to cut over, you execute the command to migrate the systems. What it does is it powers off the source VM and then replicates the last amount of changes over, which obviously, if it had been keeping up throughout the week, is a real small change window. So that short downtime is a benefit to folks that have to plan around business outages and have those downtime windows. But the convenience there is you can actually go ahead and test. And that's one of the things that you mentioned is, hey, what does engagement look like? Whenever we help customers stand up this Move appliance, it's really key to get their confidence in the system. So I encourage them to stand up a test VM even, or if they've got one that's in dev, or I know that specifically we've worked with a few customers that they got comfortable because they saw it in action before it was prime time necessarily and got a chance to see the VM cut over. We even talked about timing it so that they can have a good understanding of that next power up so that they don't sweat it and say, oh my gosh, it's not powering on. The power on is honestly just like an HA event to the point where the NIC is disabled on the source VM so that you actually do have a failback if you end up testing quickly the AHV VM and something's wrong. You can power it off and just revert back to the original. I think that that's a big safety net feature that's included with Move. But really the engagement consists of reassuring the customer the workloads are grouped together, as well as performing that test migration to show them, hey, this is what it looks like from start to finish so that you can see the VM in action. And I know that I've got some Nutanix buddies who do lab work that actually go through on site with customers and do demos to show them. So ask your local Nutanix reps or Nutanix teams, hey, can I see this in action? Or better yet, you as a customer can test it out through test drive. I think that's really a key on the Nutanix website is being able to have, and a lot of techies are hands-on. The proof is in, hey, let me see it, touch it, feel it, so that I get that comfort level that I can share back with my management team to know that this migration is going to be successful.
Absolutely. And, it's proven. We've done thousands and thousands of VMs now. Andy mentioned, during 6 years at Nutanix, he saw AHV mature and grow. We've just celebrated the 10th anniversary of AHV. It's a very mature hypervisor, full featured as well. So from a risk mitigation standpoint and from a outcome standpoint, we have a lot of proof that this is it's an easy button. We keep saying it that way.
Yep.
One of you is going to have to start repeating. That was easy. So, um, Brian also talks a lot in this blog post about what to do with existing infrastructure, and that's a really big topic as well. So, getting to Nutanix in a brownfield situation, pretty simple. We've got the easy button called Move and all of our other tools in the toolbox. But what do we do about existing infrastructure? That's been a topic that hasn't traditionally been something viable. There's a couple of big announcements here. And the first involves support for vSAN ready nodes. So VMware, like Nutanix, has these pre-certified hardware SKUs. They call them VMware vSAN ready nodes. And this means it was ready to run the full VMware stack, VMware vSphere, vSAN, and any of the other things on top of the hardware. In a pretty large support statement, Nutanix can now repurpose existing vSAN ready nodes by integrating them in with NCI, Nutanix Cloud Infrastructure, and AHV hypervisor. What's the benefit there besides the obvious, guys?
I think the big thing here is just validation from Nutanix. Nutanix has always had a very tightly controlled hardware compatibility list. Some of that was making sure that their clients got the performance that they were expecting, but also they did really extensive testing on things like the SSD and the NVMe drives to make sure that the Nutanix software wouldn't wear those out prematurely, for example. With this announcement, it really just gives those clients who purchased a vSAN ready node, it gives them a migration path that allows them to repurpose that previously purchased hardware, gives them a smooth transition from VMware over to Nutanix, and it also ensures that they'll get the performance and the longevity that they're expecting out of the hardware.
Yeah, definitely echo that. I've definitely talked with buddies of mine from Nutanix who've got customers that are looking to specifically, and have been for a few years now, honestly, looking for ways to repurpose their vSAN ready nodes. And I know that Nutanix has a process that's obviously, again, like Andy mentioned, is rigorous in the sense that we want to make sure that we give customers the best experience. And really, that's a key in the sense that it's those, again, deemed vSAN ready nodes. But in this case, it's also VxRail. That's something to me that customers in the past have been interested in. And I really feel like that XenTegra can help with those type situations. We really feel like that we've got the experience here. You can tell that we've got time in the seat. And Andy, obviously, tons of time at Nutanix. Same for me. And Philip and I have both been customers. So through our, I would say, gray hairs and experience, we've definitely seen it and done it, and are looking to help folks in those journeys. And I think that that's really part of it too, is knowing that Nutanix is built for the long run of being able to not only provide that flexible path forward for the next 5 years, but also the next 10 years. And I think that that's the model that we're seeing in that. Yes, it started out, Andy, as you mentioned, a real tightly grouped server validation process to now extending that outward a little more, to the sense that, hey, they're being more flexible because businesses are having to be more flexible. Because if you wanted to move to Nutanix in the past, you had to invest in all new gear. And that was really a tough time in my history of coordinating, okay, when are servers up for refresh or EOL renewal, et cetera, and when's the backend SAN up for renewal? What aligns with your magic 8 ball for all of those to be perfectly symmetric so that you can move to that new flexible infrastructure. And I think that that's where Nutanix is providing a solution now to help with those, I'll say, maybe not misaligned, but alternately aligned EOL refresh calendars, or where you've previously made an investment into both vSAN and, as we mentioned, VxRail?
Well, I think that's the thing there, Chris, is that, it's about reuse and extending that investment for customers. That's the primary goal. The one thing I will say, vSAN, Ready Node, and VxRail, they're not equal, right? And I think a lot of people in the industry assume that they are. But VxRail is a very different architecture than vSAN Ready Nodes. Just to be transparent there's not a direct path for VxRail. And so what Chris is referring to is there are migration incentives. There are things we can do to help and try to tap into that existing investment. But vSAN Ready Nodes, you've got a very easy migration. It taps into a process called Foundation, which Nutanix folks are probably very familiar with. But Andy, can you kind of talk through that Foundation process and what it would look like to move a vSAN Ready Node into a Nutanix cluster?
Sure. Yeah. So Foundation is another tool that was developed by Nutanix to make it simple to stand up a Nutanix cluster. It's consumable in a handful of different ways. There's a Windows app. There's an OVA that we can deploy onto your VM environment. But at the end of the day, what it's doing is it's discovering those Nutanix nodes, and it's building the Nutanix cluster for us. And that means laying down the hypervisor of our choice, whether it's AHV or another hypervisor. It's installing the Nutanix software, which actually runs as a virtual machine on top of the hypervisor. And it's building that initial cluster that is then ready for our workload migration. So a typical migration here, we're going to need to move those workloads somewhere else. We could be moving into a DR site. We may have some other VMware infrastructure that we can migrate onto temporarily. Or we could possibly, in a worst case scenario, maybe we have to shut things down and recover the workloads later. But once we get the workloads migrated off, once we have a clean VMware cluster, we can then go through that process of foundationing the cluster, standing it up with the Nutanix software, with the Nutanix platform on top of it. And then we use tools like Move to migrate those workloads back onto the cluster for us. So if we've move them to another VMware infrastructure, we're going to use Move to sync that VMware infrastructure to the new Nutanix cluster, keep those two environments in sync as we do our cutover, which Chris mentioned earlier is basically just powering off the VM on the VMware side, sending the final changes across the wire, and then powering it up on the AHV side.
So essentially, it's a brain transplant at the end of the day.
Minor surgery.
Minor surgery. Laparoscopic, home the same day.
There you go.
Well, that's an extremely useful thing to have in the toolbox, right? You may have a 10-node cluster. You may have the ability to kind of shut down a portion of that was reserved for failover and start your AHV journey, and then incrementally migrate, and then add nodes. Take a node out, add a node. There's lots of ways to do it with a very cost-effective way. If it's better for you from a timeline perspective to deploy new nodes and then add nodes to it, you've got a lot of different methodologies. And that's one of the beautiful things about HCI in general is the way that we grow it is a hallmark of HCI. Add a node, add performance and capacity. So, that comes into play as we talk about migrations and hardware reuse. The big one that has always tripped us up, and Chris mentioned this earlier, is refresh around the storage. And so in a traditional VMware environment, we talk about external storage. That's been a no-go for a long time with Nutanix. But we saw at .next last year in Barcelona, an announcement for support for Dell's PowerFlex software-defined storage platform or scale-out platform. This year, that became GA in May at Nutanix.next in DC. And so as we look at reuse, there's a new strategy emerging from Nutanix around traditional shared storage systems and being able to use those. Chris, could you tell us a little bit about this PowerFlex announcement?
Absolutely. And I think that the approach is continued with the way that Nutanix is providing a full stack solution. It's just separating and dividing it up into, in this case, a compute component, and then, like we mentioned, back-end external storage. And that's where the announcement for the Dell PowerFlex, and then, of course, future state other external vendors are really coming into play. The AHV component of that, or the Nutanix component of that, will continue to manage the compute of the system and be able to talk with the backend storage. Again, the integration with the storage vendors is basically a moving from a 1.0 to a continued 2.0 process as you move through the different vendor stack. Obviously, starting out with PowerFlex, Pure has been mentioned for the future. And basically, Nutanix is paving the way forward so that other vendors can see this path, and customers in turn can recognize and reuse their storage of choice, and still have the goodness of Nutanix being able to run the stack. And that's really where the communication lies, is that the simplicity of the Nutanix solution as a whole is always top notch. And then being able to tie that in with the customer's preferred backend storage is really the best of both worlds. The existing customers will attest to the fact that the last 10 plus years of AHV has been growth and moving AHV to a first class citizen. I remember days in the past, Andy and I both were there when, hey, it was right at that 47, 48% of all new customers are in AHV. Now it's tremendously higher in the sense that you find all of the customers singing the praises of AHV as they've been able to migrate off of VMware. And I think that this just affords potential customers another solution with those backend capabilities, really having that flexibility of repurpose and reuse as we've themed some of these topics so far today.
Yeah, and you might wonder, okay, so Chris is talking about Nutanix being in control of things. Does that mean there's no CVM? Is there no AOS? And the answer is no. The elegance of the solution here is that the CVM is still in place. AHV is still talking to the CVM. It didn't have to learn anything new. So it's not a 1.0 release. We're talking about something that has, millions of hours of runtime across a large install base now being added for support with an external storage array. So because the CVM is still there, you're able to run everything else inside of the Nutanix portfolio on these new, what we call Nutanix Cloud Infrastructure Compute nodes, NCIC with external storage, as the blog post calls it. And so you get the ability to talk to the external storage, but it's all facilitated still by the CVM, meaning all of the goodness, all of the easiness, simplicity of the platform stays in place. The other part here is that we have a different way to buy Nutanix. The NCIC SKU is different because, again, you're pairing it up with a external storage vendor. I talked to one of my friends over at Nutanix who said this is the closest thing to traditional vSphere on the market available to customers as a drop-in replacement. So if you're running compatible storage and you're looking for something to replace vSphere, you're not a vSAN person, this is an alternative platform for you as time goes on. So as Chris mentioned, today it's PowerFlex. That is GA available for the 15G and 16G compute nodes. There's compatibility. You've got the ability to install the the storage data client, the SDC, into AOS to allow it to communicate with PowerFlex. it's a pretty easy reuse path, and the support is validated end to end by both Dell and Nutanix through their partnership. Um, it's not here in the blog post, but Chris mentioned a little bit of the future. This year at .next, we also talked about Pure Storage. I want to mention that because I know there's a large addressable customer base who's ready for external storage support. NCIC as a package for buying Nutanix, along with Pure Storage support, opens up a tremendous market. Um, Based on what we've been told, it's going to be IP-based storage across any external storage support in the future. No support for fiber channels planned, but we've got a lot to look forward to. So as you think about addressable markets, Andy, I'm curious how you feel about the Pure announcement from .next and where the future kind of holds.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. You know, when I think about Nutanix, it's always been an entire ecosystem which was inclusive of that Nutanix file system, which was a really, it is a really amazing scale out file system. But during my time at Nutanix, I competed quite a bit with Pure. I think Pure as a company, it's a highly performant file system. It's they really push the boundaries of traditional three-tier infrastructure. So to me, this is a really good example of two top-tier companies coming together to give their clients that flexibility and that freedom of choice that I think Chris really touched on earlier. It's the software defined data center coming together with two really great companies. And so, if you are a Pure client, if you're very, very happy with the performance and the manageability of that solution, this just opens some doors to you that weren't open prior to the announcement.
Yeah, and it's interesting. This is a roadmap, as Chris said. You can kind of take out your crystal ball and see what's going to come next. And so I know that there's a roadmap beyond Pure for other storage arrays, for other vendors beyond that. But I think it's a smart one. I know that we have a lot of joint customers that are both Pure and, well, maybe not Nutanix today, but certainly looking at alternatives to VMware. So I'm happy about this one as much as I am about all of the reuse news that's coming out of Nutanix over the last 2 years. As we said at the top of the web podcast, we definitely have a lot of customers interested in alternative platforms, thanks to Broadcom's acquisition of VMware and all of the changes there. I think that's a big part of the undercurrent for everything we've talked about today, for migrations, for hardware reuse from those VMware installations. We've got answers, and Nutanix has got answers. And so that's the great thing for you from a company. Nutanix has always been about choice and about simplicity. You're seeing those things live out as these continued announcements come out. So Andy, Chris, I want to say thanks for spending some time talking about migrations and hardware reuse. I think it's a really tactical topic for a lot of our customers. So appreciate you guys both being here.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd love to help customers throughout the process.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's so that's our heart. Like Chris, Andy, and I, we're all people who just kind of thrive on helping other people. So if you need help, please do reach out. You can reach me at philip1l.sellers@XenTegra.com. You can go to XenTegra.com and find the contact us section. That'll get routed to the appropriate folks. But at the end of the day, we're here to help. And so appreciate you guys being here. Appreciate you listening. And until the next podcast, I hope you stay safe, get some rest, and hope that your IT stays favorable. So I'll talk to you soon.